Okay, in today's video, we're going to talk about PTSD, complex PTSD, and borderline personality disorder. And these three diagnoses, two of which are in the DSM, PTSD and borderline personality disorder. Complex PTSD is only in the ICD, which is published by the World Health Organization. But what I want you to be thinking about is how these things that superficially look similar are in fact different. So again, post-traumatic stress disorder, has these 8 symptoms: exposure to trauma, intrusion symptoms, persistent avoidance, alterations in thoughts and mood, alterations in arousal and reactivity, startle responses, more than 1 month duration, clinically significant distress or impairment, and not attributable to effects of substance. And I'd like you to watch these videos by James Maddour and Jennifer Musumba, who are talking about their experiences of trauma and how they were hurt. Both James and Jennifer have intellectual disabilities. And part of what I want you to be thinking about is how does it that when we're thinking about trauma, it can affect a whole range of people. And I don't want us to only focus on people who are verbal enough that they're writing memoirs about their experience. And obviously, they're an easy place for me to draw case examples from, including this one. Here's Roxane Gay, who was gang raped when she was a teenager. And she said, "Those boys treated me like nothing, so I became nothing." And again, you see that discrepancy between how she was treated and how she believes she should have been treated. I'm deserving, I am something. Now, PTSD, complex PTSD, and borderline personality disorder are related kinds of issues. They are different, and yet they have many of the same symptoms. They overlap. Yasmin is diagnosed with complex PTSD and talks about her experience well in this video. Carla Fisher, who is a forensic psychologist, says it's not that trauma leads to criminality, but that women with a history of abuse may respond more intensely to abuse inflicted on them. It's not overreacting. It's knowing that people will hurt you, that they will follow through on their threats, that certain things done to your body are painful. I think people with a history of violence may be more accurate with their perceptions of what people are capable of. As you're reading this, what I want you to think about is the last video that I posted with Vander Kolk, where he talks about these too large emotions and the difficulty people have in reacting well to them, and how that changes the core narrative. Am I safe in the world? Am I able to handle things? And you can see this playing out, particularly with complex PTSD and borderline personality disorder, where there are many more relational pieces than with PTSD. So this is how the ICD describes complex PTSD. So everything required for PTSD. And in addition, it's characterized by severe and persistent problems in affect regulation, beliefs about oneself as diminished, defeated, worthless, accompanied by feelings of shame, guilt, or failure, related to the traumatic event, and difficulties in sustaining relationships and in feeling close to others. And as we've talked about before, these symptoms cause significant impairment in functioning, personal functioning, family, social, educational, occupational. So how are PTSD and CPTSD different? So remember in the last slide, we said that complex PTSD is all of this plus all of this. And that this part here is what distinguishes PTSD and CPTSD, complex PTSD. So the interpersonal disturbances, negative self-concept, and affect dysregulation. We talked about this earlier, this semester, as we're thinking about the relationship between PTSD and complex PTSD, in particular, that there are different odds ratios that we're seeing for criterion A traumatic events, that for complex PTSD, we're tending to see much higher odds ratios for each of these. And the same for non-criterion A events. Here we're seeing about our odds ratios of about twice as much. And, if we're looking here at sexual assault by a parent or guardian or non-parent or guardian, either way, we're seeing odds ratios for CPTSD that are much higher than for PTSD. Again, we see this relational piece that shows up repeatedly. And Roxane Gay says, the longer I stayed with him, her boyfriend, the worse he made me feel and the better he made me feel, because at last someone was telling me a truth about myself I already knew. So in some ways, this closes the discrepancy because his behavior towards her confirmed that she was a nobody and didn't deserve to be treated well. Let's think about borderline personality disorder now. Borderline personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of instability of relationships, self-image, affect, marked by impulsivity beginning in early adulthood, present in a variety of contexts. We're seeing frantic efforts to avoid abandonment, either real or imagined, unstable, intense interpersonal relationships, alternating between idealization and devaluation, problems with identity, problems with impulsivity, recurrent suicidal behavior, affective instability, so mood all over the place, problems with emptiness, inappropriate, intense anger, difficulty controlling anger, and some paranoid ideation. So this is how Cloyter et al. Talk about the difference between PTSD in red, complex PTSD in blue, and borderline personality disorder in red. And you can see that the pattern in this spider web is different. Some symptoms are very appropriate here and some aren't. And We see this as very much, both complex PTSD and borderline personality disorder. We see these problems in, in efforts to avoid abandonment, instability in mood, paranoid dissociation, unstable relationships. All of these are much stronger in borderline personality disorder. And finally, if we're back to that same figure that we've been talking about, we're not seeing PTSD symptoms. We still are seeing these complex PTSD symptoms, but then these additional symptoms with borderline personality disorder. So this distinguishes PTSD and CPTSD, and this distinguishes complex PTSD and borderline personality disorder. I'm going to stop here, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.